All right, in this video, I'm going to talk about another way to increase capital. We're going to be able to increase capital and possibly increase our technology at the same time. So our first policy that we talked about was encouraging savings, which will then encourage investment. And the second one is, well, if our domestic savings is not enough to satisfy the amount of investment we need to achieve the growth rates that we're trying to get, we can also increase investment from abroad. And we'll talk briefly about two ways to do this. Okay, so one way to do this is something called FDI, and this is a foreign direct investment. Okay, and so this is when foreign actors come directly in and they do direct investment. Again, by investment here, we are talking about physical capital investment. So a foreign company comes in and builds a factory, or they open a store, or they open a retail branch, or they open a restaurant, etc. But they come in and they directly do this investment. Okay, so this is physical capital investment, for example, a factory that's owned and operated by a foreign entity. Okay, so that's one way to bring in funds for doing investment, is to invite foreign entities to come and do it. And this is a very common strategy to increase the amount of investment in an economy. And the second strategy related to this is called foreign portfolio investment. Okay, so we see basically similar sounding name, except for one word is different: portfolio investment. And so this foreign portfolio investment is going to be about financial investment, where the funds are flowing in, but the foreign entity is actually not there doing the operations. So this is going to be a capital investment, right? And we're talking, again, physical capital that is financed by a foreign entity. So this is financed by foreign money, but operated by a domestic firm. Okay, so generally this would be mostly two types. So this mostly would be loans. So loans in bonds, selling bonds. So this would mostly be firms that are raising money by borrowing from foreign entities, or it could be money raised through stock markets. Those would be the main two types going on here. Now, both of them, so we can kind of think of, well, what's some of the pros of these things? So FDI and FPI both bring access to increase the capital. So they both allow greater investment, so greater I, than otherwise possible. So that's a positive. Because in the absence of this, especially a very low-income country that may not have the ability to have a lot of savings in their local economy, this allows a chance to get greater investment. So this investment is going to bring more production for their country. It's going to bring jobs for the workers that are working in these entities. There's also something else, and this is especially in the case of FDI. So FDI also brings new tech and ideas, which is also tech. Okay, so that's one of the good things about FDI, is that you can get firms to come in and invest in a country. Often those firms have techniques and corporate cultures that are maybe not found in the local economy, and so the local workers can learn from this. And several countries have done this, where initially a sector was lots of FDI, and then their local firms learned from the foreign firms, and eventually they become competitors to them. In some countries, they make this technology transfer an explicit part of the requirement before firms can invest, and in other countries, it's sort of allowed to happen more naturally, I guess we could say. But it's not necessarily a requirement, and there'll be certain degrees to which it happens. The FPI has some benefits. So you get the benefit of more capital. So that's one of the good things of access to funds. It doesn't give this technology transfer benefit. One of the risks of the FPI is exposes to the country to risks of global financial markets. So that's a little bit of a risk. So the country will be exposed to global financial market risks. And for some this maybe this extra risk is not quite worth it. So there are a few countries that have opened themselves up quite a lot to FDI, but haven't opened themselves up much or a lot less to FPI, partly because of worries about these kind of global financial market risks. One last point. In addition to this, to some extent, some people have a concern about FDI, and that is politically it can be a little bit difficult to give if foreign firms are playing a big part in important sectors of the economy. It might actually be quite good for the economy if the alternative was to not have those sectors, especially when those are sectors which there's no domestic firms or few domestic firms which are capable of doing investment of that scale or have the technology to compete globally. Then it can actually be quite positive for the economy, but it can be politically sensitive if people are worried about the power or the weight that those firms might have. And this was especially true in the light of former countries that were formerly colonized, often are quite sensitive to foreign investment by the countries that were the former colonists. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. Some of that is a little bit more political than economic. It might actually be quite good for the economy. It sort of depends on the exact situation.